Welcome back, brothers and sisters. Brayton, Tim, second. Like I said, you are amazing, and we have got to talk about one of the greatest things that you're going to see on the internet whenever you're watching it, because a judge in Texas just destroyed the gun control apparatus through the executive branch, and he did it in such an eloquent way. This is like Saint Benitez level. We're going to walk through it right now. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on. We are going to deploy some sarcasm and humor with utmost precision, like a bunker buster from space. With that said, Tim, are you ready to dive into greatness?
Yes.
I mean, this is like really greatness. Like,
I love it when a federal judge puts the federal government on notice.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that. So here's some backstory. This is in a case called NAGR, which is National Association for Gun Rights versus Garland. Okay, this is all about something called an FRT, or a forced reset trigger. It's not important that we dive into that right now, because that's not the important part of this case. Basically, they sided with National Association for Gun Rights, okay? But in the conclusion, this is the part where gold happens, and this is why you sue these organizations over anything and everything that you have grounds on, because you can get stuff like this. All right, so let's dive in, Tim. This is from the conclusion of the actual decision from the judge himself, all right? I've got 4 segments I want to read to you real quick. This is number 7, slides. There is no denying the tragic nature of the Las Vegas shooting that motivated the final rule, the ATF rule. But no matter how terrible the circumstances, there is never a situation that justifies a court-altering statutory text that was democratically enacted by those who are politically accountable. That responsibility belongs exclusively to Congress. The Constitution assigns such legislative choices to the appropriate elected officials, not life-tenured judges and unelected bureaucrats. Rather than respect this intentional feature of our democratic system, defendants, this is the DOJ, chose to advance a policy agenda wholly divorced from the NFA's statutory text. Thus, to allow defendants' unlawful action to stand would be to functionally rewrite the NFA. And that's just the opener, Tim.
Yeah, wow. Maybe just a quick explanation of what an FRT is.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the forced reset trigger is a trigger that you can buy, say, for an AR-15. It drops in, and then basically when you pull the trigger, the NFA stipulates that there must be a function of the trigger every single time a firearm fires for it to be a semi-automatic. If it's to be fully automatic, a single function of the trigger will discharge multiple rounds. The forced reset trigger basically uses a mechanical advantage to help assist the reset of the trigger, meaning pushes it forward so that your finger must then pull it again, literally meeting the statutory definition of a semi-automatic and not a machine gun. But the ATF didn't like that, because with a forced reset trigger, you can make a firearm fire very quickly. It may sound like a machine gun, like bump firing, may sound like a machine gun, but it is not a machine gun. And therefore, when you go out there and try to twist the language of the law to create a new law that has nothing to do with the original law, it's just your new interpretation that's basically making a new law out of whole cloth, that's what we've been fighting with Chevron deference. It seems that all these dominoes are falling very quickly. The Supreme Court has already said Chevron's dead. And now we have a lower court saying, yeah, it's double dead, because this is another example of Chevron being misused. Anyway.
Right. No, that was perfect, because you actually set up something that we really need to address. This is a direct result of the prior wins that are literally stacking since Bruen. Okay, so the Bruen decision started, all the lawsuits began. Bruen was the argument. Then, while those lawsuits were going through, Cargill came down. After Cargill came down, Looper Enterprises came down, which is the Chevron case. The whole point of all of these things, they could not have happened if they were never started. And I know that's a really stupid point to articulate, but again, people did not give up, and they started these, and you get these kind of decisions. Like, you never know where your actions are going to go. They start small, but Cargill was used heavily in this case as well, which basically said the ATF cannot just make up laws outside of the definition of Congress because they want to.
Right.
That language is being mirrored right here. And I particularly like how he said unelected bureaucrats, life-tenured judges, and then he also hit politically accountable.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point. The legislators, or the representatives, they figured out over the last 40 years that if they just write something ambiguous, they can't get in trouble with their constituency, so they get to keep their jobs. So they needed an executive bureaucratic state to make up all the laws in between what they didn't fill in, because they would have been in trouble. So that's how you got the deep state, the bureaucratic state, everything that we're talking about, which is why Chevron just died and that entire thing is in trouble.
Right.
Like, this is a hell of a time to be alive, Tim.
Yeah, I never thought the courts would address it, because overturning Chevron really puts the U.S. government in jeopardy because they've relied so heavily on it for decades. It was something that came about from a Supreme Court decision in the 80s, and they've just run full bore with it, with every year politicians and bureaucracies making, doing worse and worse things with that that particular decision from the 80s. So now finally the Supreme Court in 2024 said, yeah, enough of that nonsense, or this throwing the whole thing out because you can't behave yourselves. Right.
Right. That's exactly right.
And initially it was a noble cause. But the problem is it left the door open. It circumvented Congress, and it left the door open for abuses. And of course, any politician is going to abuse whatever they possibly can to benefit themselves to gain more power. And that's what's been going on for the last 30 plus years. Right. So
100%.
40 years, I guess it's coming up on. So it's just insanity, but it had to end, and the SCOTUS ended it. And now we're going to see it slowly being unwoven from our government, I hope. But our government also has a history of just ignoring Supreme Court decisions. Case in point, Supreme Court says you can't alleviate school debt,
debt.
Right, student debt. And Biden goes, I'm sorry. We're going to do it anyway. Thanks, though.
Let's be honest. Biden didn't do that. Extreme left,
some purple hair staffer did it.
Come on,
right.
You know it.
Yeah.
You know it. Well, we've got more, Tim. That was just the opening salvo. This conclusion was seriously one of the best I've read. It was a very good one. So this is number 8. This remains true even when shocking events may underscore the need for legislative change. And even when this prudent constraint produces undesirable results, one must remember that circumventing the democratic process to effectuate desired change undermines the animated policy goals upon which our system rests. A democratic path to change already exists. Talking about Congress.
Right. And this is something
huge.
Right. We've been talking about this since we've started Second Legacy. Right.
Yeah.
And there is a process in place. It's called the legislative process. Right. And the courts very rarely get involved in that unless it's just a gross violation of rights. And so what the courts are saying here is, look, there's a way to do this if you really want to do it. But the problem is the left doesn't have the votes. Because they don't have the votes, they want to, use this. They want to use this corrupted Chevron deference nonsense to get the outcome that they want. And so they're just going to sidestep Congress and just go do whatever they want. And that's what they've been doing.
Yeah.
And it's not just in the firearms space. Clearly, when SCOTUS threw out the whole Chevron thing, it was over a fishing dispute, right?
A herring,
right? So, I mean, this affects our government at all levels, and it's been abused at all levels. But in the 2A community, it's been wildly abused by the ATF.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely, it's such a massive one, and guys, we're going to continue to see things and ramifications from this because all of these things that have happened in the last 3 years, they're absolutely massive things. This does not happen frequently. Like, you do not usually have this many pro cases at the SCOTUS level in a 2-year time span. Normally it takes like 20 years to even get mentioned for more of them. But anyway, here's another piece. This guy's on fire. This is Reed O'Connor, by the way. He's one of our champions of establishing himself. By jumping the gun, again, this is ATF DOJ, defendants robbed Congress of the ability to capitalize on political support to alter the statutory language following the Las Vegas shooting. Indeed, multiple bills on this exact issue were pending in Congress when defendants decided to act. None of these bills were given the chance to become law. As is often the case, public attention waned, taking with it the momentum for legislative action. But this result is even more pernicious than the mere inability to enact legislative change. Every time an agency circumvents the legislative process, it chips away at the most prudent reason for the separation of powers. That is, ensuring unelected and unaccountable individuals do not make the law. This reason alone compels the court's decision today.
I mean, you can't get any stronger wording than that.
Nope.
Right? And it's this strong wording coupled with the Supreme Court's decision on Chevron that's going to make it very difficult for ATF to appeal this. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
This seems like a final decision. The only option they have left now is to try to get something done legislatively. So
I would completely agree. And you know what? That conversation belongs in the chambers of the House. That conversation belongs on the legislative side of the aisle. Now, I may not agree, or I may agree with what they put forward, but the whole point is what this feels like in the last 2 to 3 years is almost like a reversion to the normal. It feels like a jolt back into the no. Congress needs to actually have conversations around bills because they're accountable to the people. That's the whole point. And this manipulation through the judiciary and through the executive branch, which has been stealing from the legislative, it really feels like it's starting to get at least righted back to the base levels.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. They're still corrupt. They're still manipulative. They're still gun controlling people in that party. But I mean, that it feels like that. Am I off, or am I kind of?
No.
Am I getting hints of hope here?
Yeah, it's true. And what I find most concerning about this is reading this. It's very straight to the point, based in history, based in fact. The fact is, legislatively is the only way that this can move forward constitutionally. But there's those on the left that will take a look at this decision and go, this is just wrong. We need to put term limits on judges, and we got to stack the courts. We can't have decisions like this. This decision is based in the Constitution, folks. There's no political agenda here. And the left cannot stand the fact. This is why
the judges.
This is why they want democracy, folks, and they don't want a constitutional republic, because they want to be able to do whatever they want whenever they want, and they don't care about your rights. They don't care about what's right. They don't care about due process. They don't care about the Constitution. They just know they want what they want, and they're going to get it at any cost. And that's how they argue against this stuff, with the most ridiculous arguments ever. How do you argue against this?
You can't argue against this. But that's the entire point. Even in Biden's little speech last night, he used the term Democratic, but he also used the term Republic a whole bunch too. And it was like, well, wait a minute.
No, they're waking up.
Hold on a second. No, this is Biden doesn't have a desire to start. He does have a desire. He got smoked. He doesn't have the ability to stay in office again, so he can loosen up on his language a little bit. But anyway.
Well, I think that they're taking it on the nose with the whole thing between democracy and republic. It's a discussion that people are having again.
I would agree.
So
yeah, I would agree.
He has to address it.
Well, here's the last one. Speaking of history, this is the last one. This is the way he wraps this up. It's a really strong wrap. Every year, this is number 10. Our country commemorates the revolution waged against a tyrannical executive. To safeguard against future tyranny, our founding documents designed a system that prevents undue concentrations of power in order to protect important rights and to ensure that a legislative consensus is reached before enacting laws on the most important issues in society. Such foresight is especially prudent in cases like this one. Indeed, while this case may seem focused on firearms, it represents so much more. It is emblematic of the devastating problem that increasingly rears its head in federal courts: rampant evasion of the democratic process.
Bingo. What I just said. It is much broader based than just the 2A. They have been abusing Chevron all over the place. And, obviously we care about it from the 2A perspective, but Chevron needs to go away. It was a door that was left open that shouldn't have been left open, because everybody should have known that politicians are going to abuse it horribly. And that's what's been happening. And we have, 40 some years of this nonsense to undo. It's, I didn't think it was ever going to happen. I'm glad it did. But, the ramifications of it all is yet to be seen, how this is going to be dealt with, if they're just going to pretend like this never happened and continue trying this tact. Who knows? I guess we'll find out as time goes on.
Yeah, we'll find out. And the last thing I want to say, this is the very reason, guys, in just a moment of behind the curtain a little bit. This is the reason that we started Second Legacy. When Tim and I were talking about putting this channel together, we were talking about how we were going to do it, what our angle was going to be, what we were going to cover. There was lots of things discussed, but the one thing that ended up being the final decision and the final direction was highlighting what the people who are looking for power to take our rights are doing to the Second Amendment, and then associating it with what they do to the rest of our rights. It was about using the Second Amendment as an example of what they will do to you, because the Second Amendment is the one they come for first.
Right.
They're doing it now on the other ones. This is an exact example. Because as he says right here, the devastating problem that increasingly rears its head in federal courts: rampant evasion of the democratic process. It may seem like it focused on firearms, but it represents so much more. They started in their low-hanging fruit, and they're going to translate into others, and that's why we made this channel.
Yep. For many other reasons as well, but that's definitely one of the big ones. Absolutely. All right, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for watching Second Legacy. We'll talk to you guys soon.